Seeing it's 10 o'clock, I'm going to call to order the meeting. Please stand and pledge allegiance. This time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from July the 1st, 2024 meeting.
I'll make a motion.
Second? All in favor, aye? Okay. So at this time, I would like to remind the audience that if you wish to speak, please come up and fill out a card up here at the table at front, and you'll be allowed 2 minutes to speak. Also, please turn off any cell phones or silence your cell phones. This time, Christy, I believe you have a presentation for us, Sunshine.
It's on, there we go. Now it's on. Okay. So what's being passed around to you now is just the memorandum of voting conflict. We don't actually do a presentation on ethics and those types of things. So I like to make sure when I get this opportunity to speak to the different boards that they're aware of this form and that the requirements as an appointed officer to know that when you have something that's going to directly affect you or a family member, what they call a relative, which is a father, mother, son, daughter, husband, wife, brother, sister, father-in-law, mother-in-law, son-in-law, and daughter-in-law, or a business associate, that there's some reporting that has to be done. So I like to give you the form so you have it to review. The main thing is, you know, if it's going to be an effect, if it's going to have a financial effect on one of your family members or your relative, that you be aware of it, you announce it. You cannot vote on it, but you can, after you've disclosed it, you can speak to it. So you disclose, if you watch the BCC, you'll see that happens. Stephen Barry is really good at getting that out there right out front. I don't often see other members. That's not because they don't have interest. It just doesn't come up as often as it does with Stephen Barry. So he's really good about getting it out there in front of everyone and letting you and making the record. So if you ever have any questions, call our office and we can help you, let you know how you're going to do it. Just let us know ahead of time before we get in here. And this form will help you. This is the form that has to be filled out. Like I said, you can't vote on it, but you can be involved in the discussion as long as you've disclosed. And on part of that, I just want to make you aware this is part of our constitutional amendments. Well, it is part of our Constitution. It was Amendment number 12, and the people of the state of Florida decided that this is so important that it should be part of our ethics requirements for our officers. If you have other things you think might be a problem or a conflict, let us know, because there are such things as misuse of your position. We want to make sure those don't occur either, and we can help you through that. Okay, Sunshine Law.
Christy, could I interrupt in a quick question?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, as it relates to this discussion today, obviously I have a conflict of interest in that I'm employed by Lakeview, and Lakeview has some applications in process. So is it just a matter of me filling out this form and declaring that, or?
Well, you just want to make sure that, so it would be to the question is, I know that's part of your company, so it's going to be, you work for them, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. So then that's going to be, is it a business associate, which means any person or entity engaged in or carrying on a business enterprise with the officer as a partner, joint venture, co-owner, corporate shareholder. I think on the surface, it certainly looks like it would be something that's connected to it. There's enough people here that you don't have to vote, but you could be involved in the discussion.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess we did this just at the right time. See if I can work my clicker. Oh, no. I guess I'll just do it remotely. I'll do it by hand. There we go. Okay, so you've seen this before. This is the Pork Chop Gang. In the state of Florida, for many decades, there was a group of legislatures in North Florida that controlled everything in the state of Florida, all decisions that were made. A lot of decisions were made, poker games, fishing, and not everyone was present at the time, and the public wasn't aware of the decisions that were being made. So they came to be known as the Pork Chop Gang. They lasted well into the 60s until reapportionment. But with the Pork Chop Gang, you could meet them in other areas and come up with the decisions, and it could be any one or two of them or three of them. It didn't have to be the whole legislature. There was a public records requirement at the time, and there was sunshine law in effect at the time, but the sunshine law had been interpreted to mean that the only time it had to be in the sunshine was when the whole body was in session. So there was a gentleman, John Pennekamp. This is one of those things where there was a benefit from there not being a requirement that everybody be out in the public about the decisions that are being made. John Pennekamp was the editor of the Miami Herald. I put Marjorie Stoneman Douglas up here. I know that we've heard a lot about the school that had her name on it because of the horrible violence that occurred there, but she's very important to the state of Florida. She's one of the most influential people in the history of the state of Florida. So I always like to put her up here because I want people to remember her for what she contributed and not for that horrible event that happened at the school that was named after her. But John Pennekamp was making the effort to save the Everglades. He was trying to get a hold of the property so that he can give it to the federal government to make it a national, protected under national law. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas wrote the book River of Grass, and that's part of the reason that she was so important to Florida history, because the Rivers of Grass was a very influential book that she wrote about the Everglades. She was also very active in elections and women's suffrage. So I wanted to put her in here as well. But John Pennekamp played a poker game. There's an article about it called The Glades on a Bet. And he played a poker game with a vice president from Florida Power and Light. In fact, it was at the Florida Power and Light's fishing camp. And they were the Florida Power and Light and John Pennekamp and a number of people were trying to get this money and trying to get the Everglades preserved. So that was why the game was set up. And there was some people from the legislature there, of course, some of the pork choppers. And this poker game, Pennekamp couldn't lose. He was just winning. He just kept winning against the people that the legislatures were there. And it's, according to John Pennecamp's own words, Bill Pierce of Palatka and Shands of Gainesville were both there. They were leaders of the Pork Chop Gang. And on that day that Pennekamp couldn't lose, finally, he was asked by Pierce, why don't you come over to the legislature and get it instead of taking it out of our pockets? He wanted to know, how much money do you need to stop playing this poker game and go away? And so he told him how much he wanted. And he was originally going to go for a much lower amount, but then he decided, I'll just go for it. And he asked for the money. And because the thing about the Pork Chop Gang, once they told you you could have the money, or once they made the deal with you, the deal was done, and you didn't need to do anything else. And so he went over to the legislature, got his money, used that money for the Everglades, and now we have a national, now it's nationally protected, the Everglades. So those were the two people that came, but it's so important, those are the two people that were so influential on the Everglades, but it was so important to understand that before Sunshine Law, this was happening all the time. And although a good thing came out of it, there were bad things that occurred. So Emory Red Cross was a representative. He worked in all areas of government throughout his life, including being a judge. And I believe he was also a prosecutor at one time. But Emory Red Cross had met with a press organization at the University of Florida, and what they had pushed was that we need more open government. So he kept coming back to the legislature trying to get this passed, trying to get this through, more open government. And one of the things that really fired him up was when I-75 was going in the state of Florida, there was a board that was appointed that was supposed to go through and figure out where the property, which property should be purchased for the purposes of putting in I-75. Well, the board had some friends, and they would let their friends know what they were selecting, and then those friends would go buy that property, and then they would make that money. And when he caught wind of that, he was pretty hot. He was pushing it even harder because it was costing the people of Florida money. It was costing taxpayers, and it was wrong. It was very underhanded. So it encouraged him even more to go after getting this law passed, a better sunshine law, a better public records law. So you see there we have the public records law of 1909. And then in 1967 was when the government and the Sunshine Law was passed that we know it today, and it became Section 28611. What had happened was that because the pork chop gang was running all of the state of Florida, there was large swaths of South Florida and Central Florida that didn't have representation or appropriate representation. So the Supreme Court said, you will, you will you'll redraw your boundaries because these people are going to be represented in South Florida. And once that happened, it allowed the legislature to begin to change, and he was able to get the 1967 Government and the Sunshine Law passed. It was not until 1971, I believe, when the courts finally started and actually gave an interpretation of the Sunshine Law that said, no, it's every time you meet with another member. It's not just when the whole board is in session. Because if they had wanted if they'd wanted things to be the status quo, they didn't need to change anything. So I believe it was 1971 when the Supreme Court made that decision. Florida is significant because of our sunshine, because of our public records laws. We actually added them to our Constitution. The people added them to the Constitution in 1992. That is distinct from our it's distinct from our public meetings, but they are always published together now in the Government and the Sunshine Law Handbook. So here's what's required. The meetings must be open to the public. There has to be reasonable notice, and the minutes must be taken and promptly recorded. So, you know, we vote, you vote on those minutes, and does everybody agree with those minutes? But if somebody wanted to see them ahead of time, as soon as those minutes are ready, because it does occur sometimes when the board takes a couple, may take a meeting off or not be back the next month. But those minutes become immediately available as soon as they're ready. So they may not be the official minutes, but the unofficial minutes should be available to the public. And then this just goes through that it's all meetings of any board or commission. They must provide reasonable notice, and then the minutes. So it was in 2013 that it was added to Florida Statute 286-0114 that the members of the public shall be given reasonable opportunity to be heard. So it has to be on a proposition that's coming before, they can be heard on propositions that are coming before a board. This doesn't apply to quasi-judicial, which I know you don't handle, but it gets confusing sometimes for the public because they think they should be allowed to speak on everything. But when it's a quasi-judicial proceeding, which is there's going to be a decision handed down, not an advisory decision, but an actual decision that's going to affect somebody's liberties, or not so much liberty, but their property, then that has to be open to them. That has to be restricted. It has to be open, but it has to be focused on the proposition itself. Quasi-judicial is an exception to that. These are the other exceptions. It doesn't have to, in the opportunity to be heard, it doesn't have to occur at the same setting of the action, but it has to be while the decision-making process is occurring, and it has to be reasonable in time. But that doesn't mean that you can come in and be ugly. Reasonable, orderly conduct and proper decorum. And I'm sure if you've watched BCC meetings, there's, you'll find items of that nature that you can see where someone had to be reminded of this requirement. And then these are the actual exceptions. So emergency, when the county has to make immediate decisions, those don't have to be open to the public. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of what happens and how things get started in the county when hurricanes are in the Gulf. So there's some decisions when it's bearing down on Escambia County that have to be made, and there's not time for public notice or public input. Ministerial acts, so you've seen ceremonial proclamations, and then there's an exempt area from 286.011 through 286.0113. I mean, it's actually in 286.0113, but that doesn't apply to advisory boards, so you don't have to worry about that. And then, of course, quasi-judicial, which we spoke about. And these are just opinions that were written by the attorney generals over the years regarding what the law is. The attorney general is responsible for publishing the book and providing legal advice regarding government and the Sunshine Law. So these are some of their opinions. So it says, while it's not a direct violation for members to circulate their own written position papers, it's strongly discouraged. Then you've got the one that says position statements must not be used to circumvent the requirements of the statute. And then finally, any subsequent postings by other commissioners on the subject of the initial posting could be construed as a response subject to the Sunshine Law. And we've talked about this before. One of the most important things that kind of gets away from us, when this law was passed, there wasn't social media. There was just the media. So they dealt with it on paper, and now we deal with it in a digital array. So when people are posting things on Facebook or whatever account they're using to post their opinions, it's important that no one reply back. That's what that last one is about. If any subsequent postings by other commissioners on the subject of the initial posting could be confused as a response subject to the Sunshine Law. So you don't want two people on the same board responding to each other. It doesn't mean that you can't have conversations. It doesn't mean that you can't be in public together. But you don't want to be responding on digital media, and you also, when you're in public, you want to make sure to avoid any appearance of impropriety. So keep it a light-hearted discussion when you're having discussions, because people on boards are friends, and they do see each other at events. It's regular for people from a particular board to be everyone to be invited to an event. So you just have to be conscientious about having conversations with each other. There you go. And there are penalties for violations. You've got the $500 fine. It can be criminal. There can be suspension or removal from a board, and also attorney's fees. So University of Florida, as I mentioned earlier, it was the College of Journalism that kept bringing this to the forefront, and now they have the Brechner Center for the Advancement of the First Amendment. There's a lot of great articles in there. If anything ever comes up, when things come up that are big about public records or Sunshine Law, the Brechner Center will have an opinion on it. And it's good to get in there and find out what their information is. And so this is just, so every year we get a new version. And as you see, they're different in sizes. The earlier ones I think were larger because they used thicker paper. Because the one that I carry now is much larger than anything. It looks more like the 2004 book. They grow every year. Exemptions grow every year, and that's why that happens. And if you want to know what's going on in the current year exemptions, there's at the introduction, it lists, the Attorney General will list all the new changes and the new exemptions. And new exemptions, just like, because we live in a digital age, because there are actions that are taken against people that are public officials or even county employees or state attorneys, public defenders, there's our fire department, people's home addresses, their children, they need to be protected, and because it's so readily accessible out there on the internet, the Sunshine Manual grows to continue to protect the people that are most at risk. And then this is the federal, so when you send out a request for freedom of information, this is who's handling it. That's the Department of Justice. Any questions? Okay. Well, like I said, if you come up with anything, just, you know how to reach us.
Thank you.
Kathy knows the number.
Thank you, Christie.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the opioid budget review.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we actually have received 2 different allocations of our opioid abatement funding now. In 2023, we received $2,489,263.51. And then in 2024, we received our second allocation of $1,546,004.98. So the total funding that we have received to date is $4,035,268.49. Of that, we have currently allocated $1,517,189.63, which leaves us a remaining balance to work with of $2,518,078.86. And if you need me to repeat any of those, just let me know. It's a lot of numbers. And it looks like our first allocation came in July and our second allocation came in February. So I'm not sure really when our 2025 will come in. But I will tell you that we do report on the state's fiscal year, which starts July 1. Not sure if that means anything as far as funding goes, but. Okay, any questions on our current balance?
Any questions, anybody?
Okay.
Thank you. Next
Chair-
on,
Excuse me,
Go
Chairman.
ahead.
I actually have one question in regards to the allocations. Excuse me, I wasn't here last meeting, but I was going over the minutes, and I was noticing that we had 2 allocations to the core program, one for the 2025 fiscal year, and then we allocated funding all the way to 2026 of $421,139.09. So if we're in 2020, why do we go all the way to 2026 already?
So the reason why we did that is because the core program is also partially funded through the state, which goes July 1 through the end of August, September, October. It goes, so it's July 1 all the way through the end of June. So I think that's why we went ahead and allocated that second part. But if you go back and watch the meeting, so the core program was initially funded 100% through the state. We got a notice saying because the state of Florida has now decided to fund every single county in the state of Florida, they have reduced everybody's funding. And you'll see that in the community health application as well. They were also initially funded through the state. So there is a decrease in allocation each year, and that's what we went over. So the funding that the core team requested is only to keep them whole. It's not anything above and beyond what they're currently doing.
Okay, so that's through 2026, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so, and the question I have, because when we first started, we were told that we were not a, how was it put, Ms. Christie? We wasn't supposed to be what you call it, actually, you had said it, a long-term operational cost type funding for when other organizations had came to actual funding, and, we were talking about how the monies were going to be used, things of that nature. And the question I have now is, you're speaking of the core and now community health being decreased by the state. So now we're going to become a supplemental funding organization for basically any type of organization now that the state says, hey, you got this other pot of money over here now, use it.
And the state actually did put that in their request, that they intended the opioid abatement funding to supplement their core program.
Okay, so-
you hit it right on the head.
Right, so.
But the idea is for, at least for our core team, I do know that we're going after other grants to try to minimize the amount we have to take from the opioid abatement funding.
So now we're looking at supplementing multiple state organizations through the opioid abatement.
The only two we have that deal specifically with opioid is the core program, and the only two entities that receive that funding is our emergency management core team and community health. Nobody else gets the opioid abatement funds.
Right, that so far, but we got a stack of applications.
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant from the state, not
Right,
our
right.
funding, not
Right,
this
so
funding.
now we have a stack of applications. So going by that business model, what's to take any other organization to say, hey, where you're supplementing these organizations, why you can't supplement us long-term?
Well, if they had other state funding, some of these applications are to increase their capacity for what they're currently doing. You'll see that in Lakeview's application, you'll see that, and that's okay, because we're not, it's not something they're just starting up and going, hey, fund me 100% and this is what I'm doing. Part of the notice of funding availability also was, how are you going to continue to sustain if this funding goes away? And the core team is working on that same plan as well. They're working, there's lots of opioid abatement grants out there that we're working on so that we can minimize how much is coming out of our opioid abatement funding.
Yeah.
Everybody would have the same expectation.
If I could, I think what you're asking is originally you weren't allowed to supplement, you were not allowed to replace the funding that the county had in place. But then when the funding from the state went away, we are replacing that funding, but we're not doing it in lieu of the state funding it. So if the state, is that what you're trying to tell him?
No.
It's not an in lieu of.
It is in lieu of.
No, so if the county had a program that they paid $1 million for and it was a program, a pre-existing program, and the county said, okay, instead of us paying for it, we're going to take opioid abatement, and it's just going to be the same program. But in this situation, it's the state who actually controls the money, and they're not saying, they're doing away with the money. So it's hard to break it down except that they're doing away with the money. In a situation where the county has it, the county would have to go on paying it. We could give them money in excess of the $1 million that they're already paying. But as far as a state program, the money's gone.
So you're saying basically it's because the state says use the money, it's okay, but if the county said use the money, then it's not okay.
It's not a situation where the money would still be there. So if we budgeted $1 million every year and we decided, hey, we're not going to budget that money anymore because we can just take it away from opioid abatement. They can't replace the funding that way. So in this situation, the funding no longer exists. So it's not like what we are funding is and it's not going to be a full because there's grants coming in. But what we're doing is replacing the funding from the state that the state said no longer exists.
It's the same thing, Chrissy. It's just different entity. It's a state, it's the same exact process, but you're saying it because the state is not funding it anymore, then it's okay to do because the money is coming through the state. Versus if if the county was initially funding it, and this county said, the county couldn't say, we're not going to fund it, take it from the opioid board, but the state in essence said, and so the state in essence can do that.
The state can clear us to do it.
Yeah.
And I think the word maybe that we're looking for here is we can't reallocate. So let's just say we had $1 million going to stock opioid prevention vending machines, okay? Let's say the county put $1 million into that. Opioid abatement funding comes. We can't go, oh, we're going to just now reallocate and pay with opioid abatement funding and save ourselves $1 million.
But the state can.
I don't work for the state. State does what state wants.
But that's, I mean, but that's basically what's happening. You said I hit it on the nose, that the state says, well, since the opioid money is here, we're not going to fund you all anymore, get it from the opioid board.
Well, and we do still get a certain percentage of funding. We're not 100% floating core with opioid abatement. We still do get state money. The difference is the state allocation, instead of going to a certain number of counties, now goes to all of the counties,
Okay.
which depleted our funds, but we still do get some funding there.
I just see how this could be doing foresight, how this could get sucked up real fast with 2 or 3 organizations, because you're looking at $500,000 plus now. And as we know, over time, budgets grows. So what happens, the state comes back next time and say, we're not funding anything. So now you're looking at $700,000-$800,000 towards one program, and you're only dealing with like $1 million or so. You see, and then you got another
Yes.
one over here, and they say, and so now between 2 organizations, 3 organizations, now it basically didn't blew the entire fund up year after year after year. You see what I'm saying? So now, then what do we do then?
And I think that's where this board comes into place. If that were to happen down the road, I mean, you guys can make the decision to, if CORE isn't the program you want the funding to go to and you think there's something better, you have that ability.
No, CORE is great, but the only challenge that I have is that CORE is great, and they do a great job. I've been over there, I met with them, I went through the program. It's an awesome program. But we also have other organizations in the community that's also doing work too that needs funding. And based on what the action of the state is doing right now, I can just, you know how it goes. You know, when they start depleting funds, it's only just a matter of time where they're just going to be like almost to like nil to none, because this fund is, the money's coming in, and they're going to just look at this as another way of them, well, the state, and I know the county doesn't have really, a whole kind of lot of leverage in that. And I can just see foresight. I can just see this being really eaten up between almost 2 to 3 large situations, and then our other community partners out there kind of like, doesn't have a chance.
I think that's a bridge we're probably going to have to cross if we get there and make some different allocations if we need to.
I think
She's
that-
correct. It's an allocation question, and that's
Yes.
going to be for you to that's why you have to watch your budget and make those decisions. It's like any other organizations, you don't have to fund them. But it was the recommendation of the state that be the source of the funds. So non-funded requirements from the state is a pretty common thing. We just usually have to find a way to fund them.
You just tell the state to come on, show up at a meeting. We got some questions for them.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head though, Tommy, is that that's what this board is for determining the allocation of where the funds go. And we are dealing with limited numbers. We see we've got now availability of 2.5 million balance, and got several programs right here in front of us, so.
All right, so you guys have a couple of documents in front of you, and I know that Ms. Danielle did send out the link to the full applications, so I'm not sure how deep you guys got to dive in there, but the only thing that I printed in front of you, so you have the overall score sheet from the Escambia County Board that evaluated the applications, and then for each applicant, you have the program summary and their budget. And I put the budget in there is because I think that's very important for you to see where they're actually putting the funds. The program might be really great, but then when you break down the budget and you see more than half of it is going to things like computers and car leases, and I think that's important for you guys to take into your evaluations. So just looking at the overall score sheet, we actually had 7 applicants, very good applicants, I might add. We had Community Health of Northwest Florida. We had Lead Inc., Lakeview Center's CAT program, Lakeview Center's Opus program, Ministry Village at Olive, Reentry Alliance Pensacola, and Waterfront Mission all submitted applications for the funding. The overall scores from the committee, community health, the top section that you guys have is pass-fail stuff. That's stuff they had to have in there, like prove that they're a nonprofit, prove that, you know, they've been around for at least 2 years. So just basic things that they had to have. And then the bonus points, there was a couple of categories in there, and then the rankings at the bottom. So community health got the highest. They ranked number 1. We actually had 3 applicants that tied for second. We had Lakeview Center Opioid Prevention and Underlying Services, Ministry Village at Olive, and Waterfront Mission all scored the same. And then the next one, which was 5th, was Lakeview Center's CAP program. 6th, the Law Enforcement Against Drug and Violence, which is the lead. And then 7th was Reentry Alliance Pensacola. So that's how we scored them. I do want to remind you that we don't have to award them all, and we don't have to use all of our funding today. So if there's applicants that we think they could come back and apply again when we release this again next year with a little bit of a stronger application, we can do that. So it's kind of up to you guys to make the decision on what you want to move forward to the BCC to be awarded for this year. And then we will release the same notice of funding availability again next year in June or July, just like we did this year. I know we have a couple of really strong community partners that couldn't apply this time just because they didn't hit that 2-year benchmark that I know will be applying next year that will bring different types of applications as well. But I just wanted to point that out to you guys. So let me know if you want me to walk through each one of these, if you have questions.
I just know it's a lot of information that came out just recently, you know, this packet to digest and take all this in. I don't know what process we want to take in doing this. If we want to, you know, question you right now by that, you know, you present to us stuff, or do we want to, is the process come back at a later time? You know, have time to digest this and come to our own
That's up to you
conclusions?
folks on what you need to make a good decision.
Any thoughts on the board?
Yes, I would like to take some time to digest it. I think, you know, because I tried to go to that link and it wouldn't open. It had some type of security thing, and I tried to go into it. So this is my first time actually seeing all of this, all these different applications.
Kathy, you had something?
I'd rather take a little bit of time, additional time would be
Okay,
beneficial.
that doesn't impact you at all?
No, that's just fine.
Okay.
Whatever you guys need to do.
All right. Dr. Williams, you have any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think it's important that everybody has a good chance to review it. I was able to get through the link. It wasn't easy at first, but I have reviewed it all. But yeah, I think we certainly need to have adequate time to review. Typically, we've been meeting every other month, but I think that we've been trying to get this money out in the community for a long time. So I would recommend we meet again as soon as possible when people have had a chance to review it.
Okay. Matt, you have any thoughts?
I just have one question. I see some of them have a total amount that they've requested, and community health, I don't see a total amount that they're requesting. Do you have that, or we just don't
I
know?
do. So for each of them, community health is requesting a total of $500,000. The Lakeview CAT program is requesting $258,264.
Hold on just a second.
Sure.
Say that number again, please.
For Lakeview. Lakeview is $258,264 for their CAT program.
That's on the back, okay.
Lakeview's opioid prevention and underlying services is requesting $349,077. The Law Enforcement Against Drug and Violence is requesting $103,972.55. Ministry Village at Olive is requesting $775,000. Reentry Alliance Pensacola is requesting $302,100. And then Waterfront Mission is requesting $338,878.
And so when you add all that up, did you add all that up to a grand total?
It's just over the amount we have, barely.
Okay, thank you.
And whatever you guys don't allocate, this just rolls into next year. It just will be added on to whoever applies again next year.
Because if you use all the fundings up now, you really don't know when your next allocation is coming in.
I don't, and the next time we'll put this out for folks to apply for again will be next June or July, same time period we did it this year.
Okay.
Thank you. With that being said, I think we're unanimous here. We would like to postpone this and have another meeting next month, possibly. Look at the month.
So you have a motion?
I have a motion.
Yes, motion.
Second.
That was quick.
She'll need more details and able to put it in the meeting minutes.
Okay.
Motion
The
to,
motion,
I'm sorry. Motion to table the voting on the applications until next month while we have a chance to review them.
Second.
all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Looking at the calendar, 11th of November that's Veterans Day,
Yeah,
correct?
we're closed.
Yep. We'll push it out to the 18th, right before Thanksgiving.
Unfortunately, I'll be out of town.
Well, I'll
You
be
may
out,
not-
I'll be out of town on the 4th, so.
Dr. Williams may not be able to vote anyway.
I was wondering about that. Would not be able to vote at all, or,
You and I are going to talk about that afterwards.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So if I'm excluded from voting, then it doesn't matter.
But you have input.
18th would be okay.
Okay. What does 18th look like, everybody? Does that work for you?
If you want me here.
Okay, well, I mean, does it work for the
It works for
county?
the county,
Okay.
yeah.
We'll set it for the 18th then.
Just so you know, they took the attorneys off the advisory boards, and we're concentrating on the boards that have quasi judicial hearings and that type of thing. We have enough of those.
All right, that brings us to the election of the chairperson. And I do not want it. So,
I'd like to nominate Ms. White for chairperson.
all right. I second that. Do a vice chairperson?
You should vote on Catherine White first, or if there's
Okay.
any other nominations.
All in favor of Kathy White?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Kathy. Vice chairperson,
I guess I'm in the nominating mood. I'll nominate Mr. Tommy White, vice chair.
all in favor of Tommy
What?
White?
You have a serious look on your face, sir. Is that okay? All right.
Wasn't expecting, sorry.
Vote on Tommy? All in favor? Aye.
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 Congratulations, Tommy.
Look at that. That's two whites at the same time. That is interesting. Look at that.
That won't make things confusing at all. In the notes, I can just see it now.
All right, right, next thing on the agenda is questions regarding the data.
Well, I think you guys were handed, I believe. Do you want to, did you provide the data?
Sorry,
Did you provide the data?
I did.
Do you want to give them just a quick summary of what it is?
I just came from another meeting. So, part of the data is from the core program so the first part is the core program data that I just got, that I received from them. And they have a lot of updates I haven't gotten with Joey in the last couple of weeks. So that just gives you an overall picture of the hot spots, what we're seeing as far as opioid overdoses. It continues to be around the same range. And as of July, we're already at 1,700. So now we're into October. So just to give you an overall update, what the zip codes look like, where they are seeing the hot spots when the core program and EMS is going on their runs. What I also included, just for you overall, just education basis, if you go further on in the packet, what we're seeing as far as what the state's telling us, other usage with adolescents and our community members. And I just wanted to paint a picture for you in that. So you know, I know this is abatement, but where are we looking at public health-wise? Opioids affect public health. So when we're looking at public health, how are we also educating the community, and how is this money being allocated to help in that educational process and prevention of all substances? I know we have to focus on opioids, but just painting the picture of our community. So one thing you'll see in this, the data for the Florida Youth Substance Abuse Survey is from 2022. We will be getting the results from that soon. I actually have a webinar on that on the 18th of this month. So I'll be able to give you some 2024 data after that webinar on that. So it's just an overall public health picture. One thing I did want to include, I also included Santa Rosa County. Sorry, this was another presentation that I gave. Just to point out, I also looked at motor vehicle accidents. So again, painting a picture of our overall health of our community. Out-of-home care for our children. Again, how is just substance use disorder affecting the whole family, just not opioids? I think that for this abatement committee, it's a really good picture for you to envision on the headways that we're making, just even with this abatement money. Hopefully it will impact all of our families. I put in here drug arrests as well, again, so you know, so you can be more informed when you're making these big picture decisions for us in public health. Any questions with that?
This report,
Yeah.
you said in the packet, I don't have it.
It was in the emails.
It was in an email.
It was in an email, okay.
But Mr. White, I can get it to you. It's just from other, I also put in here some national data, so how we as Floridans are ranking nationally and what that picture looks like as well. So I just didn't provide this information to you, just the abatement money. I'm on other committees that were also looking at this overall data for our community and public health. So,
But thank you.
sorry
Ms.
that you
Denise.
didn't get that, Mr. White, in
I
time.
may have, it's just, I may
know.
have just not opened it and whatnot, overlooked it. But thank you for everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have any questions about the data or any other questions, you can always contact me at CDAC.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you. Any new business come before? All right, with that, we are adjourned. I'm sorry? Any public speakers? Okay. Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you.